Since I live streamed Mafia 2 last week on my Xbox One X, along with the DLC to Mafia 2, Joe's Adventures, I thought it would be only fitting to do a review of Mafia 2. Yes, I realize this game is a few years old. It came out in 2010, developed by 2K Czech, which is now part of Hangar 13. However, Mafia 2, as I just pointed out, is backwards compatible on the Xbox One, Xbox One S, as well as Xbox One X. You can purchase it for PC through Steam, and you can play it on PlayStation 4 through PS Now. And I also happen to review the other Mafia games. City of Lost Heaven this past January, following my Let's Play of Mafia the City of Lost Heaven. And nearly 2 years ago, after I Let's Played Mafia 3 when it launched in October 2016, I did a review of Mafia 3 as well. So, without further ado, the review of Mafia 2. As always, we're going to go over the pros, cons, and my verdict. Feel free to let me know below in the comment section your thoughts, your views, your opinions regarding Mafia 2. Kicking things off with the pros, Mafia 2 runs way better on console than its predecessor ever did. So Mafia 2 was built for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, whereas Mafia the City of Lost Heaven was predominantly built for PC. Eventually there was a port version for Xbox and PlayStation 2, but as I went over in my Mafia review, yeah, the port wasn't so good. However, the port for Mafia 2 on all platforms, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PC, and today Xbox One and PC and PlayStation 4 through PS Now, is definitely pretty good. Mafia 2 has a fantastic story, wonderful characters, a beautiful setting and world, and it goes between two time periods. First off, 1945, and eventually there's a jump from 1945 to 1951 in the fictional city of Empire Bay, based mostly on New York City. And this is an absolutely stunning world that 2K Czech created back in 2010. The cars, clothing, weapons, the music, which includes the score, as well as hit songs from the 1940s and 50s. Some of the weapons you get to use include the 1911 Magnum, Tommy gun, a grease gun, M1, and a few others as well. And they all sound and perform quite beautifully depending on which gun you prefer using. There's plenty of clothing options for VO to choose from via the stores, as well as customization for all the vehicles from the 1940s and 1950s included in Mafia 2. You can take them to the garage, you can change their license plate, paint jobs, give them upgrades, change the rims, and you can store, I believe, up to 10 cars in your garage. As mentioned, the gun mechanics are really good and they sound fantastic, especially whenever you have a Tommy gun and you're just going to work on your enemies or blasting them away with a Magnum. It just sounds awesome. Mafia 2 still looks good 8 years later. You compare that to how Mafia the City of Lost Heaven looks 16 years later, and Mafia 2 definitely holds up a lot better graphically and performance overall than its predecessor. In other words, 8 years later, it still looks good. It may not be up to date compared to games in 2018, but Mafia 2 still looks and performs beautifully. It is easily one of the best crime dramas ever made to date. It just feels real. The characters feel like they belong in this world. You have amazing chemistry between Vito Scaletta, the protagonist of Mafia 2, along with his best friend, Joe Barbaro, as well as all the friends and foes they happen to encounter throughout the events of Mafia 2. And unlike Mafia 1, where some of the voice acting was hit or miss, overall, the voice acting is top-notch in Mafia 2. And throughout Mafia 2, there's several elements that come into play. A few stealth operations, tailing, sneaking around, doing stealth kills, getting into fistfights, learning how to duck and block and throw light as well as heavy punches. And as I already mentioned, firefights. Of course, you can't have a mobster video game without gunplay. And the gunplay, as I mentioned, absolutely fantastic. And the final pro is the health system to Mafia 2, which I find to be superior to that of the first Mafia game. You want to hear my opinion about that? Go check out the Mafia review vid I did back in January. Anyways, the health regen in Mafia 2 is very good. It starts off as green. As you get injured, it goes down to yellow, then red. But the good news is if you take cover and hide during a firefight, it will go back up to yellow. It may not max out, but you can go to a restaurant or a bar or a safe house and get food or a coffee or a beverage in order to max it back out to 100. So I definitely prefer the health regen system in Mafia 2 over the health system that was in the first Mafia game. Time to move on over to the cons, and just like any other video game, there are cons even for Mafia 2. First off, this game is short, very short. It is only 12 hours in length, 15 chapters total. A lot of the game was actually cut, and some of it most likely reused for the various DLCs. The cars don't handle as well as in other games. They handle all right, not too bad. And some people could make the argument, well, these cars are from the 1940s and 1950s. Maybe 2K Czech intentionally made the cars handle this way. That is a good point as well. But there are definitely other video games out there that have better handling when it comes to vehicles, but also there's games out there that have way worse handling when it comes to cars. Now, as with Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven, one of the biggest foes in the game is the police department. The Empire Bay Police is the worst enemy in my opinion because of the fact that, similar to Mafia, you have to abide by certain rules. No speeding or accidentally hitting an NPC car when there happens to be a cop driving by or a beat cop. They're going to come after you. The good news is, if you have money, you can simply bribe the cop or pay your tickets, or you can run for it and they'll send more cops after you. But the problem is magically, tons of cops manage to show up out of nowhere, and there's always a cop. It's like a Walgreens when it comes to cops. Every corner, there's a cop walking by or a cop driving by, making it very difficult to pick locks in cars or bust windows in cars or do almost anything. And most of the time, whenever I'm playing Mafia 2, I put the governor on just so I'm not speeding throughout Empire Bay because I don't want the hassle of a cop trying to pull me over and bribing me when I'm trying to do a mission. And it's even worse when you have a time limit and you have to get from point A to point B within a time setting, and the cops will still come after you if they catch you speeding. And unfortunately, in certain circumstances throughout Mafia 2, you have no choice but to speed in order to accomplish said missions. Another con is the reality that other than collecting Playboy magazines, robbing stores, stealing cars, or crushing vehicles, there really isn't anything to do besides the chapters, which rarely give you the opportunity to free roam. Despite the fact that Empire Bay is still a very beautiful city. It's awesome to drive around and check out, from Lincoln Park all the way to different regions, Oyster Bay, for example, down to the port, all the way up to Hillbrook, the nicer part of Empire Bay. It's virtually a dead city. You have NPCs walking around, you have diners, you have bars, but for the most part, besides the chapters and collecting Playboys, like I mentioned, or robbing stores to make extra money or sell cars, there's really nothing else to do in the game. It is an open world game, but the truth is Mafia 2 is more episodic than it is open world. You play the game in an open world setting, but you're forced to move on to the next chapter. And unless you finish, say, chapter 7, and it says go home, only then can you really go do anything else. But most of the time, you just feel like moving on to chapter 8 or the next chapter throughout the story of Mafia 2. You really have no incentive or desire or drive to go explore because you spend most of the time driving around Empire Bay anyways. And that leads to another con, the lack of a fast travel system. And because of the fact that you spend most of your time driving from the north of the map to the south of the map, yeah, I like driving in this game, but sometimes you just want to fast travel. Whether it's, back to the safe house, or to like various gang locations, or if you fail a mission and you have to start over, it would be nice to be able to fast travel back over there. But alas, there is no fast travel system in Mafia 2. The next con revolves around the DLCs of Mafia 2, and I'm including the DLCs because I don't want to make a separate review video going over those. I'm not including the DLC packs, by the way, which was vehicles, etc. I'm going to talk about two specific DLCs. First off, Jimmy's Vendetta Revenge. I think it was called something different on each console. This wasn't a very good DLC at all, and the truth is, it had nothing to do with the story or events of Mafia 2. It was set in like an alternative reality of Mafia 2, revolved around this character called Jimmy, and there was a different crime family in Mafia 2. Well, still Empire Bay, but the missions were terrible. They were not very good. In fact, they were so bad that I never finished that DLC, and when Joe's Adventure came out, I decided to pass on getting Joe's Adventure back whenever that was, 7, 8 years ago. And it was only recently that I actually played Joe's Adventure through the live stream this past weekend. And Joe's Adventure added a lot more stuff to the DLC. It had more to offer than Jimmy's Vendetta or Jimmy's Revenge. However, there were definitely elements that were very similar to the Jimmy DLCs. And what's really disappointing is there's stuff in Joe's Adventure, like the main missions. There's main missions and then there's side missions. And you have to do a certain number of side missions to get to a main mission. And the side missions, for the most part, aren't very good. The main missions are pretty decent, however, but it feels like the main missions are nothing more than cut content from the main story of Mafia 2. There's a total of 25 missions altogether, which is side and main missions. 7-8 hours in length, which makes this feel like its own game, which is why some people call this Mafia 2.5. And it is kind of fun to play as Joe, but there's not much voice acting in Mafia 2.5. I mean, Joe's Adventures. And a lot of times when you would expect Joe to say something, he just doesn't say anything. Or you hear recycled audio from Mafia 2, the main story. It really does feel like 2K Czech didn't exactly have the budget to bring back the voice actors to add more stuff, audio-wise and dialogue, to Joe's Adventures. And whatever they ended up using was probably already made for the main story of Mafia 2. It just feels like a lot of the interiors are so well detailed that they probably were originally meant for Mafia 2, but for whatever rhyme or reason, 2K Czech decided not to include them in the main game and then decided not to completely waste them and repurpose them for the Joe's Adventures DLC. There's still moments when it comes to the Joe's Adventures DLC, but it's overall not a very good DLC. However, unlike the main story, Joe's Adventures actually does allow for free roam in between missions. So that's one thing I definitely liked about Joe's Adventures over Mafia 2, is the reality that you could, in between missions, go around and do stuff that didn't automatically force you into the next chapter. There's the pros, the cons. Time now for my verdict regarding Mafia 2. Quality over quantity. Despite being the shortest of the Mafia games, only 12 hours in length, it's still a fantastic crime-based game, perhaps one of the best crime-based games out there to date. And it is, in my opinion, the best game in the Mafia franchise. It has the best protagonist of the three, Vito Scaletta. It has the best supporting characters like Joe Barbaro, Leo Galante, all the others as well that you encounter throughout the events of Mafia 2. The cars are beautiful. The setting of Empire Bay is awesome. The vehicles, the weapons, the clothing, everything about Mafia 2 sets it above and beyond the other two Mafia games. Now, there are strengths to Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven as well as Mafia 3, but overall, when you add everything up, the characters like Vito Scaletta, Joe Barbaro, Leo Galante, the others as well, the time setting, first 1945, then 1951, the music, the cars, the clothing, the weapons, the stories, the graphics, the way that the game still handles pretty well compared to issues that both Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven and Mafia 3 have. Overall, in my opinion, it makes Mafia 2 easily the best game in the Mafia franchise to date.